The areas I was in were very densely Spanish speaking. So most of the time when you were walking down the street biking, you were running into Hispanics. Very rarely would we pass a white person on the street. If we did, we talked to them. Like, it's not like we were, excluded from talking to English speakers. We'd refer to them to the English missionaries if they were interested. But what I realized and what I didn't know before the mission was how friendly Hispanics were most of the time. Most of the time they would talk to you. They would take a card, or if you got to know them well enough in that first, minute or two of the conversation and figured out what their needs were, they were very interested. Most of the time they had families. They generally had big families too. Hispanics are a lot like, a traditional LDS family in that regard, where they like to have lots of kids. And despite the fact that in my mission, most of them were poor, didn't have great jobs, living in apartments, they'd still have 4 or 5 kids in a very tiny apartment, and not the greatest of living conditions, but they like to have kids, which is great. So teaching or talking about the family or blessings of the family was always important. If you asked them if they loved their families, they always did, and they always wanted them to be happy. And growing up in the valley, a lot of those families would have kids that were part of gangs or had to make serious life decisions early on because of the pressures of the valley. If you didn't have a good education, you didn't really get anywhere. If you didn't go to school, didn't do your homework, you found yourself doing other things, which were a lot of times contrary to the teachings of the church. So a lot of parents had stresses and had worries. And if you could find the right question for each individual person you talk to on the street, especially Hispanics, you could usually hit home somewhere with them. Talk about your own family, talk about your own struggles or your own pressures, and a lot of those kids will have the same things. If you can get in with the kids, you can get in with the family. Like, if you find a youth that's interested, and they bring you home to talk to their parents, and the youth is interested, and a lot of times those families will listen, because the parents generally are Catholic, but they're not usually practicing Catholics, or they have no idea what the teachings are actually in Catholicism. In that regard, they were very ignorant of their own religion. So you can talk about the family and eternal life and all this stuff, and they will agree with you. They're like, oh yeah, that stuff, that's what I believe in. But a lot of times, what they believed in was different than what their church was teaching. So you could try to convince them or help them understand that what religion they're in, even though they're not practicing, does not actually teach these things. And you would want to help them understand that they want those things, but they can get it from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So in learning Spanish, you're going to have time to learn language before, every day you have language study and every morning, and that's great. Do it. Don't slack off. Make sure that you're doing that every day. But you're not going to learn all of that until you talk to people. One of the biggest fears is, what if people don't understand me? And that's a reasonable fear. I had that fear all the time, doing contacts on the streets, where I could always say a few phrases and my pen would back me up. But you have to put yourself out there. Hispanics love it when a white American that doesn't know Spanish is trying to learn Spanish. They respect that you would, learn a language so you could talk to them. And they were very excited. Once you could speak Spanish and they could understand you, they would love to talk to you, because you're like, wow, this person actually wants to learn Spanish, because that's not something that most of the population in the area, they didn't bother to learn Spanish. They wouldn't care, because they could kind of do their own thing and avoid it. So two different groups, two different social groups there. So you have to, if you try to talk to them, you'll learn Spanish. If you don't, you will struggle. Give it 6 months, you will still be struggling if you refuse to talk. And I had a companion like that who just didn't know Spanish very well, and he wanted to say everything perfectly, so if he couldn't say it, he wouldn't say it. Or wouldn't try to say it. And that was a big hindrance to him, because if you're testifying or teaching, the Spirit will be there, and whatever you're saying, that message will get conveyed through the Spirit. If they're receptive and you're thinking, or if you're being in the right spiritual mode, then the point will get across. Whether you butcher it, whether you say it backwards, or say something completely different, your companion could be there to testify of whatever it was you were supposed to say, and it'll get across. And the more you talk, the more confidence you'll gain. I was in Spanish for all but 6 weeks. And my 6 weeks in English were great because I was confident in my ability to teach people in English. But the reception in English is way different than the reception in Spanish. Especially, probably similar to most missions, but especially stateside, where you get the dynamic of different languages and different people and different cultures at the same time. You learn that people don't respond the same way. A white American will respond way differently than, quite literally a Mexican that's in the United States that doesn't know English. They will listen to your message way differently, or understand your intentions way differently. So you have to learn to figure out who you're talking with so that you can give them the right message and the right tone, or else it'll just come off as salesman-like. You can't talk about it the same, or else, and no one likes salesmen. They don't. It's a fact. So yeah, study the language, but talk to people. That should be your goal. Learn verbs, learn sentence structure, but most important thing, get out there and start saying stuff. And they'll correct you. People will correct you and help you because they want you to say that the right way. Just get over that fear. That's my advice.